Double entry for capital or equity. Capital is the wealth in form of money or other assets owned by a person or organization or available for a purpose such as starting a company or investing. Owner can introduce capital in three forms: cash, bank, or in form of non-current asset. Now, let's look at the double entry if the owner introduces capital by cash. Debit cash account, credit capital account. If the owner introduces capital to the business bank account, debit bank and credit capital. If the owner introduces capital in form of a non-current asset, debit the specific non-current asset and credit capital. Double entry for owner introducing capital in form of cash. Key vocabularies: capital credit, cash debit, debit, credit, impact, assets. Remember the rule: debit to increase debit, debit to decrease credit, credit to increase credit, credit to decrease debit. 1st July 2017, started business with 20,000 cash. Cash debit, capital credit, cash comes into the business and the business prepares a capital account on behalf of the owner. Remember the rule. Here we apply rule number 1 and 3. What's the impact on cash? Will it increase or decrease? It increases. If cash increases, cash account will be debited or credited. Debited. This means we are applying rule number 1. Cash has a normal debit balance. In order to increase it, you debit. What's the impact on capital account? Increase or decrease? Increase. If capital increases, capital account will be debited or credited. Credited. This means we are applying rule number 3. Capital has a normal balance of credit. Therefore, in order to increase, you credit it. In conclusion, cash increases, therefore debit cash. Capital increases, therefore credit capital. This is how you show the impact in the cash account. Open a cash account. Debit side 1717. Opposite accounts name capital followed by the amount 20,000. Whereas in the capital account on the credit side 1717, opposite account's name is cash 20,000. Now let's see how this can have an impact on the accounting equation. Capital increases by 20,000. Cash increases by 20,000, which should be listed under assets. Now let's see how to show the transactions in a general journal. 1717 the date. Cash account debit 20,000. Capital account credit 20,000. Now let's post the entries to the ledgers. Cash account debit 1st July, opposite accounts named capital followed by the amount. Capital account on the credit side July 1st, opposite accounts named cash and the amount 20,000. Now let's balance the capital account. Credit side is greater, bring it to the total. 20,000 take away 0 gives 20,000. 31st July balance carried down. Bring it to the opposite side, August 1st. If today is 31st July, tomorrow would be 1st of August. Balance brought down 20,000. Now let's balance the cash account. Debit side is greater, bring it to the total. Find the difference, should be 20,000. July 31st balance carried down. Bring it to the opposite side, August 1st, balance brought down 20,000. Double entry for introduction of capital to the business bank account. Key vocabularies: bank, cash, debit, credit, impact, assets, and capital. Remember the rule: debit to increase debit, debit to decrease credit, credit to increase credit, credit to decrease debit. 1st July opened a bank account and deposited 90,000 of the cash into the account. In this case, bank increases, bank comes into the business, and the business opens an account for the owner as capital. Remember the rule. Here we apply rule number 1 and 3. What's the impact on bank? Increase or decrease? Increase. If bank increases, bank account will be debited or credited? Debited. What's the impact on capital? Let me change that cash into capital. What's the impact on capital? Capital increases. If capital increases, capital account will be credited. If capital increases, capital account will be credited. Therefore, we apply rule number 1. Bank has a debit balance, to increase it you debit. Apply rule number 3. Capital has a credit balance, to increase it you credit it. Now let's see how to post this entry to a ledger. Open a bank account, write the date, followed by opposite account's name, capital, and the amount 19,000. Open a capital account on the credit side, write the date 1/7/17, opposite account's name, bank, and 19,000. Now let's see how this can have an impact in the accounting equation. Capital increases by 19,000. Assets increases by 19,000 because bank is considered as a current asset. Now let's see how to post entries to the general journal. Date 1/7/17, bank account debit 19,000, capital account credit 19,000. Let's go to the bank account. 1st July, opposite account's name, capital. Write the amount 19,000 on the debit side. Go to the capital account, date followed by opposite account's name, followed by the amount. Now, let's balance the capital account. Credit side is greater, bring it to the total. There isn't anything to deduct on the debit side, therefore 31st July, balance carried down 19,000. Bring it down to the next date, August 1st, balance brought down 19,000. Now let's balance the bank account. 19,000 to the total. July 31st, balance carried down 19,000. 1st August, balance brought down 19,000. Double entry for introducing capital in form of machinery. Machinery, capital, debit, credit, impact. Remember the rule: debit to increase debit, debit to decrease credit, credit to increase credit, credit to decrease debit. 1st July, owner introduced a machinery for business use, 9,000. Machinery comes into the business and the business maintains a capital account on behalf of the owner. Remember the rule. Here we apply rule number 1 and rule number 3. What's the impact on machinery? It increases. If machinery increases, machinery account will be debited. What's the impact on capital? Increases. If capital increases, capital account will be credited. Let's correct this error. Capital increases. Therefore, debit machinery account and credit capital account. Now let's see the impact on the accounting equation. Capital increases by 9,000. Machinery as an asset increases by 9,000. This is how you show the impact in the ledgers. Now, let's post the entries to the general journal. Date, double entry machinery account debit, capital account credit by 9,000. Go to the machinery account on the debit side, 1st July. Opposite accounts name capital followed by the amount 9,000. Capital account on the credit side, 1st July. Opposite accounts name machinery followed by the amount. Now let's balance the capital account, bring it to the total. 31st July, balance carried down 9,000, bring it to the other side. August 1st, balance brought down 9,000. Now let's balance the machinery account. Debit side is greater, bring it to the total. 31st July, balance carried down on the credit side 9,000. August 1st, balance brought down on the debit side 9,000. In summary, we had learned the 3 types of introduction of capital to the business in form of cash, bank and non-current asset, posting double entries to the general journal, transfer of entries to the ledgers, and balancing of ledgers. Next, we will look into double entry for drawings.